Hello and welcome to the program. Today we'll be talking about the situation in Northern Ireland. In December, the representatives from Great Britain and Ireland signed a declaration of principles to work toward peace in the region. Today we'll talk about that possibility with our guest, Father Sean McManus, who founded the Irish National Caucus in Washington. It lobbies for justice and peace in Northern Ireland. Father McManus was born in Northern Ireland. Also joining us is Jamie Detmer, Washington correspondent for the Irish Sunday Independent and the Scotland on Sunday publications. He was born in England and has written extensively on Northern Ireland. Also with us is Maureen Merker, president of the Ulster Scot Society, a genealogical historical society in the U.S. She was raised in Northern Ireland but has lived in the U.S. for 30 years. Welcome to you all.
Thank you.
In just a few minutes, we'll be taking questions from our audience of high school students who are in Washington this week on Close-Up's Government Studies program. And when we come to you, we'd like you to tell us your name and where you're from. But first, we'll begin with a discussion up here about the history of conflict in Northern Ireland. We hear that this has been going on for quite a while. How did it begin and why? Father McManus?
Well, it has its roots, like many other problems in the world, it has its roots in British colonialism. Ireland was England's very first colony. It was in Ireland that the British experimented and learned the techniques of racism, discrimination, oppression that they took to America, don't forget, to your country, they took it to India, they took it to the Mideast, they took it all over the world. And wherever the British flag has flown all over the world, there has been racism and discrimination and oppression. After all, that's why you Americans kicked the British out of this country.
When did the conflict there begin and what?
Well, the British, in one form or another, first got a foothold in Ireland in 1169. So that's a long time ago, folks. It's been almost 1,000 years. And up until 1920, the British government controlled all of Ireland. And the centre of British administration in Ireland, this is very important, was not in Belfast, but in Dublin. And for centuries, England ruled Ireland from Dublin as one economic, geographic, political, cultural entity. And then in the 1916-1920 era, when Britain realized they could no longer hold all of the country, as they had for centuries, they retreated into the northeast corner, the part of Ireland I'm from, and they carved out a little area there of 6 tiny counties. Tiny little area out of the whole of Ireland, because they knew that in those 6 counties there were 1 million pro-British people, 1 million Protestants, who happened to be Protestants, to 500,000 Catholic who were nationalists. And the deal was, Britain said, look, to the Protestants of Northern Ireland, we'll set you up here in this new artificial entity that had never been heard of before in all of 1,000 years of history. We'll set you up here in a position of power, run this area any way you like, as long as you keep it loyal to the crown, as long as you keep it to the empire.
I think I've got to interrupt there, because I think that's the most prejudiced interpretation of the history of the last 400 or 500 years in Ireland. First of all, in terms of the setting up of Northern Ireland and the 6 counties, you're suggesting that it was a kind of scheme in London whereby London decided they will carve out this area as their own. They didn't really have much choice. As you well know, in the 19th century, there was tremendous resistance from Protestants in Northern Ireland who originally came from Scotland, I agree, in the 16th, 17th century.
So it wasn't a free act of Parliament.
Hold on, who had lived there for a long time. And you know perfectly well that in the early part of the 20th century, it was made clear that Protestants would resist by force of arms being pushed into a republic government into one country with the Catholics in the south. And it was clear that the British government could not even rely on the British Army in Northern Ireland to resist Protestants resisting all of that. So, I mean, it isn't the case that the British government sat there and decided to carve out this nice little enclave.
But they did. They did. By an act of the British Parliament. Now, we can get into motives and interpretations.
Yeah, but an act which was accepted by the Dublin government.
It was the British government, by the Act of Ireland of 1920, that carved out and created that artificial entity. It wasn't the Protestants of Northern Ireland, it wasn't the Catholics.
The Republic of Ireland seceded from the United Kingdom in 1921. Northern Ireland has been an integral part of the United Kingdom since 1803, almost as long as the United States has been a nation. I think we have a very different interpretation of this, and I would like to give you just a very brief background of Northern Ireland. Let me say, in the British Isles there are two nations. There is the United Kingdom and the Republic of Ireland. The United Kingdom consists of Scotland, England, Wales, and Northern Ireland. We have a unitary form of government, and our government is at Westminster in London. The Republic of Ireland seceded from the United Kingdom in 1921.
How did it first become part of the United Kingdom?
Northern Ireland has an area of 5,400 square miles, a population of 1.6 million, and it was a haven for religious dissenters. And much like the United States, there's a large Huguenot population in Northern Ireland. They came after the revocation of the Edict of Nantes. They're a wonderful group. They improved the linen industry, and you've all seen beautiful Irish linen. The Moravians came to Northern Ireland. They were Palatine Germans, and they built a most beautiful village called Grace Hill. And Grace Hill is almost identical to Salem in North Carolina. Then we have Quakers who were chased out of England at that time, and they built a beautiful village called Bessbrook. Now, and
what about the Catholics, Maureen? Say a few words about the Catholics.
Well, they're really...
because we also live there, you know.
Fine. In 1603, Northern Ireland was a separate kingdom right up until that time. And let me tell you something. I'm sorry I don't have a map that I own. There was nobody in Ulster, hardly anyone, except around the borders. So almost everyone who is there today are immigrants to Ulster. Be they Irish, no matter where they come from, Maureen, they are primarily
where does
immigrants.
This get us today? I mean, these poor people must be totally confused about this sudden eruption of different interpretations of 400 years of Irish history.
No, this is something that is not...
I gave the very clear interpretation.
I'll bring you right up.
I think I did.
It was going great until he interrupted and confused it.
I mean, one of the problems of the whole conflict is that the Irish and the British have very long memories, and there are a lot of grievances, and we're in a cycle, if you want, almost of revenge and grievances and remembered oppressions. We now have a situation where we've had a conflict, a low insurgency conflict in Northern Ireland for 25 years. We have over 3,000 people dead, and there are attempts, by various sides to try to find a way to end this conflict, and it isn't that helpful by going back to the Edict of Nantes.
Ending it is important.
Going back to the 15th or 16th century.
No.
Let's discuss how
that was the 17th century and the 18th century. But in the Republic...
But hold on, but it is important.
Well, let's discuss how to end it.
To get to contemporary times. I mean, as the Irish Taoiseach, the Premier Albert Reynolds, said in a speech in January, most people would accept that the partition was wrong, was ineffective, was unhelpful. But two wrongs... But
you didn't agree with that at the beginning. You disagreed.
No, I wasn't arguing a moral position about that. I was just trying to, touch, the tiller slightly.
Yeah.
That two wrongs don't make a right.
I didn't say that.
That partition was not helpful. So what we've got to discuss today here, and what I think will be far more helpful for the Close Up Foundation students,
we've got
to find out how we unravel the problem.
And the most important thing we can discuss in any problem is who is in charge, who controls. If you go into any city, any town, and there's a problem, your first question must be, who's in charge here? Who is in control? Who writes the law? Who controls the courts and the police? Who controls all of that in Northern Ireland? Not
and
the
also
Catholics,
who controls
not
that
the
in the Republic of Ireland?
The London government.
Let me tell you that when the Republic of Ireland drafted its constitution in 1937, in Articles 2 and 3 of their constitution, they claim the whole island of Ireland.
But Maureen,
and there has been troubles ever since that. Let me also say
Maureen, hold on a second.
Even though there are recognized international boundaries there are recognized international boundaries between what is today's Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland.
Let's go to our first student questions and get you involved. Go ahead.
My question is directed at any of you. My name is Dan Howard from St. Louis Park, Minnesota. And how do you believe that the portrayal of the IRA in recent movies has affected people's views about this conflict?
Do you have any views on that? Have you seen some of the movies, or do you have any opinions on the portrayal of the IRA?
I've seen Patriot Games, and it seems as though they portray them as a bunch of terrorists just out for blood.
I find most of the Hollywood movies concerning the IRA and paramilitarism in Northern Ireland, whether it's pro-IRA or anti-IRA, singularly unhelpful and generally ill-informed as well. Patriot Games actually annoyed me as well. I mean, the idea, you know, the IRA tries to project itself as a disciplined body. To a certain extent it is. It doesn't control all its members that easily or that well sometimes. I think that we have got to try to keep much closer to the facts in those movies than we do. There's been a film very recently concerning the Gulf bombers.
The alleged.
Yeah, sorry.
Falsely accused.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
That was the point of the movie, yeah.
Well, as I understand it, various facts are changed, and I think that's probably unhelpful. It doesn't help people understand the situation in Northern Ireland.
Well, can I say something on that? Obviously, it was a movie. It wasn't meant to be a historical documentary. It was a movie. It was made in Hollywood, okay. But I think it has done a number of things. It has made it very clear to American people that British law, when it comes to Northern Ireland, is not normal, that civil liberties are suspended, that there's no justice, and that if you're Irish, from Northern Ireland and living in England, you're accused of a crime, you will not get justice, and you'll live in prison for years. It has done that, and not only, you know, one of the characters, Jerry Conlon, was the star, or the main person, and Paul Hill featured in that movie. And Paul Hill now, who's now married to Courtney Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy's daughter, Paul Hill today, as we speak, is still being victimized by a British court in Northern Ireland. They're still trying to pin a false confession on him. And I think it's very important, what everyone's interpretation of the problem in Ireland to understand is that the rights you people here, from Minnesota and California, the basic rights you take for granted, we have never experienced them in Northern Ireland. You have no right to a jury trial. You have no right to privacy. A coerced confession is admissible as evidence.
There are no jury trials in...
You wouldn't tolerate for a split second what the ordinary people in Northern Ireland have to stand for.
You have to give a slightly broader picture, because as you know, there's a kind of dynamic that no one is in control of, or no one has full control over in Northern Ireland. And I will be the first to agree with you that there has been a tremendous corrosion and corruption of the British judicial system, and particularly... Hold on, Father McManus, you've got to give a broader picture than that, and in Northern Ireland. A lot of the changes in the law in Northern Ireland, having non-jury trials, was in one way, as you well know, provoked by terrorism. And the problem is that if you're a terrorist organisation, you're trying...
Hold on, laws came into existence in 1920.
Let each other finish.
Terrorism is the reason that they have what is called diplock courts, and they just have one judge, because there is intimidation of juries. And I know I would not be very happy to sit on a jury where a terrorist was being tried. And this was why these courts were invented. If there is an appeal, then there are 3 judges. But then again, you cannot have jury trials for these terrorists.
The dynamic in Northern
Ireland
on the judicial side is this, that it is in the interest of the IRA to provoke a reaction, and a liberal, harsh reaction from a democratic government.
And who's the democratic government?
Father McManus,
there has never been a democratic government ruling Ireland ever in centuries. The English government is not a democratic government in Northern Ireland.
I'm sorry,
it has never been a democratic. Who has elected John Major to be in charge of Northern Ireland.
Father McManus, you're trying to suggest
who has elected John Major? That's basic to democracy.
We're not talking about. We're not talking about the Gaza, and we're not talking about. Hold on, please, Maureen.
It's not. There is a Republic of Ireland and the United Kingdom, and Northern Ireland is an integral part of that United Kingdom, as I told you before.
Excuse me, I'm going to have to say, we'll have to have you speak one at a time, because we can't hear what each person is saying.
All right.
Let's go to our next question.
Okay, hi, my name's Nicole Alvino, and I'm from Orange County, California, and I have a question that can be directed to any of you. I know that there are Great Britain troops stationed in Northern Ireland, and I want to know how you view these troops and if they could be seen as the first step to a possible resolution.
I would like to answer that. And the troops are United Kingdom troops, and they are in the United Kingdom. It would be the equivalent of the United States troops being in California. They are there because of terrorism, and otherwise they would not need to be there. Remember also that there are many Ulster regiments in the British Army, and they have had a wonderful, wonderful reputation for leading the United Kingdom through many wars. Most of their field marshals in the British Army have been Ulstermen, and you know their names, like Montgomery and Alexander, etc. So the fact that the British Army is in the United Kingdom is where it should be. It is not in Ireland and has not been in Ireland.
Can I respond to that? As you can tell, by my accent, does it sound as if I'm English or British, eh? Wouldn't you say by any definition, I'm an Irish guy? Okay. I'm an Irishman from County Fermanagh. Ireland is a partitioned country. 26 counties are controlled by the Dublin government, and the remaining 6 are still under the rule of the London government. And since 1972, there's no government in Northern Ireland. London rules directly. Now, the Protestants of Northern Ireland maintain that's undemocratic, and the Catholics doubly maintain it's undemocratic. The experiment of the London government has never worked in Ireland. It has been a disaster for its own good name. It's a disaster for the Protestants and Catholics. And what I want to see is the Protestants realizing that the British game in Ireland is over. It's truly over. London doesn't want them. London used them for centuries in their own colonial interest. But if Maureen had gone to London, like I did, or to England, and had more Protestants gone to live in England, they would have realized that the moment they're in England, they're Biddy or Paddy. Doesn't matter whether they're a Protestant or a Catholic. And until the Protestants and Catholics in Northern Ireland realize that they themselves somehow have to work out this new solution or a new future, London hasn't got the answer. Britain has given up all its empire. It's only left with 2 areas, the Malvinas, the Falkland Islands, and Northern Ireland. They're getting out of Hong Kong, not because the majority wants them to leave. In fact, the majority in Hong Kong wants British rule to continue. There's 8 million people in Hong Kong. There's only 1 million people in Northern Ireland who want the British to leave.
McManus, I mean, the impression you're giving these people is inaccurate. You're talking about a colonial situation. You have a majority of people in Northern Ireland who wish to retain their link with Britain. They have a vote. There is a vote in Northern Ireland. There's a ballot box. We're not talking about a colony where people do not have a vote. 65% of the Northern Ireland population vote for parties regularly in elections, parties which wish to retain the link with Great Britain.
Why do we have a problem? Why is there a problem?
We have a problem because we have a paramilitary organisation. Well, we have more than one paramilitary organisation, but finally the problem is because you have an IRA who wish to bomb and shoot people into the south.
That's nonsense. That's a part of the problem. Now, let me tell you what I think on that. The IRA is definitely a problem, a major problem, and they use violence. And I don't diminish or dismiss that for 1 minute.
Do you condone
No, absolutely.
Do you condone or condemn it?
I condemn it outright, unequivocally. And I condemn all violence, whether it's the IRA, the British, the Loyalist terror gangs, whatever terror gang is operating in or out of uniform. And the solution must lie in non-violence. But let me point out here that in 1968, 1969, there was a peaceful, non-violent movement, a civil rights movement. There was no IRA Where did the IRA come from? Because the British Army came in and started crushing.
It was a marginalised
group. The
IRA
is more of a symptom than a cause. The cause is injustice. The cause is that Ireland has never been given a chance to be a free country.
I think the underlying cause of the IRA, regardless of what they might say, is the fact that their goal is a united Ireland, as is the goal of the Republic of Ireland. And this is one of the very great problems that we have.
Good morning. You would accept that...
the Republic of Ireland, let me also say, signed both the Helsinki Agreement and the European Communities Treaty of Rome in 1976. And they are in violation of both of those treaties.
The Irish government has made it perfectly clear that they will get rid of Articles 2 and 3, which lay claim to Northern Ireland, and in a recent opinion poll in the Irish Times, 81% of the population indicated, or it suggested that 81% of the population of the South would agree to give up their claim to Northern Ireland.
Well, this has been, but for all these years, this has been one of the problems since 1937, this false claim to the territory of Northern Ireland.
I'm sorry to go back into history, but the Anglo-Irish Treaty signed between London and Dublin agreed that the essential long-term aim was a unity of the island. So, I mean, they hadn't done anything extraordinary. No, I'm sorry, it's in the treaty in 1921, and so the South had not done anything extraordinary by having Articles 2 and 3 in the Constitution.
Absolutely, they did. That is
student question.
That is a.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Iltz from St. Paul, Minnesota, and my question for any one of you is, how come the media has forgotten about the situation in Ireland?
I have a saying that had the communists been doing in Northern Ireland what Her Majesty's government has been doing, we would have been free long ago. But because the oppressor in Northern Ireland is England, America, the American government, and the American media turns a blind eye.
Can I ask you...
in general.
Can I ask you, when you say the media, do you mean the American media or the British media?
The American.
I mean, I think at times that they, I mean, in the 1970s, there was certainly a great deal of coverage in the American media about the problems in Northern Ireland. I think that, as in Britain, people get bored, actually. I think readers and you people out there get bored and don't want to hear about the problem again and again. It's been running so long. The Guardian newspaper, I mean, the British media, you know, obviously covers this conflict in detail, as the Irish media does as well. But the Guardian newspaper, which in London, which has a very political kind of readership, did a survey of its readers and asked them, what stories do you like reading about? What subjects are you most interested in? Which subjects don't you want to know about particularly, or you're fed up reading about? And Northern Ireland, I'm afraid, came absolutely bottom, even a very political readership. But in America, I think it's sad that the major American newspapers have not had full-time correspondents in Ireland for a long time. The New York Times has one in Dublin. The others send people out every now and again. And I think the problem with that is that you get ill-informed. And I think we saw that in the Gerry Adams visit last month. When some of the American coverage was quite extraordinary. There was a great deal of misrepresentation of facts in the American coverage, which irritated not only British tabloids in London, but also Irish government politicians as well.
Next question.
Hello, my name is Owen Rivas from Centerville, California, and my question is directed to Father Sean. This conflict has been going on for centuries. Do you see an end to long-standing aggression, and how will Catholics and Protestants react once it ends?
Well, I would have to say that for the first time in my short or long life, to you guys, long life, but for the first time in my life, I am beginning to be hopeful. I don't know how it's going to play out, but I do believe that right now in Ireland at the moment, there's a new dynamic, which wasn't there before. There's a new potential that hopefully will bring about some sort of a solution. And number one, however you analyze the problem in Ireland or Northern Ireland, compromise has to be an essential part. Because as said here, there's 1 million Protestants in Northern Ireland. I was reared among them. There's 500,000 Catholics. There's a split allegiance. And there's a real problem. That has been confounded by the fact that for many years the Dublin government and the London government haven't done the right thing. But right now, I'm inclined to think that the London government and the Dublin government are beginning maybe to try to do the right thing. And I would say that for the first time, the Dublin government, I think, I've always been very critical of the Dublin government, but right now, I think this, the present leader, the Taoiseach as he's called, Albert Reynolds, seems to be genuinely and openly and sincerely trying to reach out to get everybody involved in a solution. So I think, for the first time ever, I'm hopeful.
There's one. Could I please answer a question to you and tell you that there is hope in Northern Ireland? For example, in Northern Ireland, we have two school systems. There's the state schools and there are Roman Catholic parochial schools. And this is a sad situation in that the children do not get to meet each other. They mature without any cross-cultural intervention. But in fairly recently, parents themselves who are very distressed about this have initiated an integrated school system. And I think there are now 21 schools and 6,000 children are going to these schools. And I feel that this is a great step forward, and hopefully there will be more of them.
I'm pessimistic about the future of peace and this particular peace initiative for a number of reasons. One, Maureen was talking about integrated education. In fact, only 1% of Northern Ireland children are educated in integrated schools, and that's after a tremendous effort for the last 20 years. The chasms between the two communities, I think, is wider. The statistics show that there are less and less people living in truly mixed areas. Voting districts are now, almost totally either Protestant or Catholic. There are a number of obstacles to peace in Northern Ireland. One is you have got to find a form of words which will satisfy nationalist desires of the minority, and the majority wish to remain tied to Britain. And no form of words has yet been constructed that can do that. There have been various attempts and various solutions tried and proposed. The second thing that worries me is the rise of far more effective and far more deadly Protestant paramilitary groups in Northern Ireland, like the Ulster Volunteer Force and the Ulster Defence Association. In about the 1985-86 onwards, there were slowly you could see a new leadership come taking control of these paramilitary units, and they have become far more effective, far more deadly, and they're far better armed. The third major obstacle is how far is the IRA prepared to compromise, and I suspect they're not prepared to compromise very much. On Saturday, Gerry Adams made a speech at the annual conference of Sinn Féin, the Ardèche, where he said that Republicans would have to prepare for another phase, adapt to a new phase in the conflict to achieve Republican goals, and he put that at 2 or 3 years. I'm not too sure that Gerry Adams, even if he is a dove, as some suggests he is, can deliver the IRA on a compromised agreement. There is one other obstacle, and that is in the House of Commons, that John Major, the British Prime Minister, has a very slim majority and has very little room for manoeuvre. He is not lord of all he surveys in the Conservative Party. He has a rump of about 60 right-wing, rebellious, fractious MPs who are very anti the European community, for example, and in the summer John Major had to turn to support to the Ulster Unionist MPs in the House of Commons. He cannot afford to alienate those MPs if he wishes to retain control of the Conservative Party in Parliament or get through European legislation. So I am very worried, and one of my worries is that Northern Ireland may be worse off after this peace process if it collapses badly than it was before.
Let's go to our next question.
Hi, my name is Mark Cordor from Huntington Beach, California, and I was wondering, you might not agree with me, but it seems to me that this struggle in Northern Ireland is very similar to that of the Palestinians and Israelites in Israel on the West Bank. And so I was wondering, do you think that the UN should step in and maybe help mediate this struggle that's going on?
That's a good question.
I don't think it's completely different in that the Palestinian land was taken from them to form the State of Israel, and the Palestinians are landless. The Republic of Ireland seceded from the United Kingdom, and they have their own state. They are a sovereign state. Northern Ireland is, they have, Father McManus said there is no government in Northern Ireland. There's no government in Scotland, Wales, or England either, because it is a unitary form of government. And the seat of government, as I mentioned before, is at Westminster. And each state sends, or each kingdom sends their representatives to that British Parliament. And they're all British.
Maureen doesn't realise that she has misstated the position of the party she supports in Northern Ireland, the Unionist Party, because the Unionist Party and John Molyneux insists that there should be a local government in Northern Ireland.
At the present there is not, however.
Yes.
So I did not misstate it.
And they want that change.
No, Mr. Molyneux does not want a government.
He wants a local government.
A local government.
Yes.
They want local government strengthened, as in Scotland, Wales.
They want a parliament
and
in Northern
England,
Ireland.
and they do not. In England, they
don't.
They have local government. They have county government, city
Maureen,
governments, town governments,
official
and they
unionist
want
policy.
to. And they
Official
want,
unionist
excuse
policy
me,
is to
and
have a
they
local assembly in
wish
Northern
to
Ireland.
have a stronger local government. They used to have an assembly, but they don't anymore. They haven't had one really since 1972.
I would welcome UN involvement. I would welcome any outside catalyst, because I believe left to the triangle of Belfast, Dublin, London, there's going to be no solution, and we have 70 years of proof. I believe the UN can play an important role. I believe America can play a key role. That's why we want President Clinton to fulfill his promise and appoint a special envoy to Northern Ireland, because an outside catalyst can focus the minds of the people there. It can focus the minds of the international community. It can come as an honest broker. And Dublin and Belfast and London have clearly given lots of proof that they cannot solve it themselves. We need outside help.
But they can't be...
The problem can be solved, and it can be solved by the terrorists. If the IRA will lay down their arms, as I understand it, the loyalists said they will lay theirs down also. So it's a terror campaign.
I mean, the question is about whether the UN can help. I'm not too sure they can. President Clinton himself was saying, and this has been American administration policy since Jimmy Carter, that the solution has to come from the people in Northern Ireland and in the island of Ireland. An honest broker, well, I think the British government and the Irish governments at the moment are desperately trying to be honest brokers and desperately trying to find a solution that can satisfy I was about to say both groups, but in fact we're confronted by more than two groups in Northern Ireland. I think that one has to allow this peace process to go ahead, even though I'm pessimistic about it. I think it will be a very fragile process. But one thing that has been clear over the last 25 years, that after each of one of these periods of negotiations, there has been almost a high watermark. There has been certain agreements made, and there's been no retreat from those agreements or those acceptances of certain principles. And so maybe we're looking at a situation where we're going to get the water rising, ebbing down again, and then flowing up further. But I think that outside intervention or interference is not going to help. I think it will provoke more violence in Northern Ireland.
But you see, this is what concerns me about people who essentially support the British position in Northern Ireland. They have a double standard for everything. The United Nations has an important role, they'll say, all over the world. America has an important role all over the world. The international human rights community has an important role all over the world, except one place, Northern Ireland. Thou shalt not touch Northern Ireland because you'll make matters worse. That is a false logic, and I submit a very suspect logic, because the bottom line is that, look, outside interference or attention will embarrass whom? Her Majesty's government. And anything that embarrasses Her Majesty's government is taboo. And that's the basic problem. I'm saying it's time for America to apply a single, not a double standard to human rights. If discrimination in South Africa is wrong, and it most surely is, then it's equally wrong in Northern Ireland. If the torture of prisoners and the misuse of people in Chile or any place else is abhorrent to the US Congress, then the same violations of human rights in Northern Ireland must be equally abhorrent. It's time for America to take a stand and do the right thing on this issue.
One thing I would like to say is that having lived in Vietnam for 5 years and having observed the United Nations, and as we see the United Nations in Bosnia and in Mogadishu, etc., they do not play a very good role in any country that I have seen them been in. And it's very important that since the United Kingdom is a democratic society, they must solve their own problems. President Clinton cannot send a representative unless he is invited to do so. And that is common courtesy between sovereign states.
Let's go to our next question.
Carmela Delanis from Burbank, California, and this question is directed to everyone. I was just wondering how the country's economic standard is being suffered because of this conflict.
In Northern Ireland, in some ways, it may be better off from this conflict, ironically. Britain subsidised Northern Ireland to the tune of about $4.5 billion a year. There's been a tremendous effort to try to develop the economy in Northern Ireland. One of the things that Father McManus probably won't accept, but it is the case that most, I would think, virtually every Dublin politician would accept, is if you have a majority, if you have Northern Ireland forced into a unity with the South, and you force that majority to become part of the South, there's going to be tremendous economic problems for the Irish Republic, actually. It's a fragile economy. They will have tremendous costs in fighting off probably Protestant paramilitaries who don't want to be part of the Irish Republic. But in the north, there's obviously, I mean, I was partly, not being totally frivolous about Northern Ireland probably being better off in the conflict, because there are obviously areas of the areas of the economy that can't be developed because of this fighting, like, you know, tourism would probably be better off in Northern Ireland if there wasn't a conflict. But there has been a tremendous amount of money pumped into Northern Ireland over the years by the British government.
Well, I'm afraid, while I see some points in that, I'm afraid it's a very negative, cynical attitude. Look, Ireland is destroyed by political instability and by violence and by injustice and oppression. Consequently, the economy is a basket case. In a terrible situation, and wherever I'm speaking for the whole island, it's a destabilized economy, north and south, and obviously one doesn't have to be an economic genius to know that a stable society is good for the economy. People prosper in a stable society, in a just society.
Father McManus has an agrarian society, and they do not have very much industry. Northern Ireland, to the contrary, has always been a very industrially developed nation.
Used to be.
They have,
not any longer.
They had the largest shipbuilding works in the world.
During the war they have not any longer. Harland and Wolff is not the largest shipbuilding country.
Not anymore.
Not since the last war.
It was heavily industrial, just like, and in every society, we all need a Detroit. We need heavy industry for wealth.
There's no
and so
industry.
Northern Ireland has always been much
Maureen?
more industrial than the Republic.
Where is the heavy
Republic
industry?
of Ireland's economy today is that of a third world nation, and it couldn't exist except for the funds it receives from the European community.
Maureen, but your impression of the Irish Republic's economy is extraordinary.
They get $12
Maureen, may I just reply? Maureen,
yes,
may I reply? In the last 15, 20 years, there have been tremendous strides in the Republic over its economy.
Yes, there have, but it's still small.
Of course it's small. It's a small country, 3.5 million people. Father McManus, may I ask you something, though? Why, I would assume that you would want the economies of Northern Ireland and the Republic to thrive. Can I ask you why you then oppose and try to prevent American investment in Northern Ireland?
I do not oppose.
Of course you did in 1986.
I do not
in
oppose.
1986.
You asked me a question. Now let me answer it. You asked me a question.
Yes.
Why do I oppose American investment? I most assuredly do not oppose American investment. I promote and I favor American investment. In 1984, the Irish National Caucus launched the MacBride Principles, which is an affirmative action code of conduct, a fair employment code of conduct for American companies doing business in Northern Ireland. We want American investment, but we want American firms to be fair in their employment, to take a stand against the systematic, endemic anti-Catholic discrimination in Northern Ireland. And that has, since 1984, MacBride has been passed by 14 states into law and over 50 cities, and it has been the most effective campaign ever against anti-Catholic discrimination in Northern Ireland. And all experts would agree that it was the MacBride campaign, more than anything else, that prompted the British government to move on discrimination, prompted the 1989 Fair Employment Act.
I would partly accept that, and it's an interesting area. But for example, in 1986, the Shorts factory in Northern Ireland, about the biggest employer in Northern Ireland, secured a contract from an American firm, which John Hume, nationalist MP, head of the Social Democratic and Labour Party in Northern Ireland, helped secure, and you tried to sabotage that. Now, as you well know, fair employment legislation was brought in by the British in 1976 and again in 1989. And I would agree with you that it has been useful for people to campaign and say employment practices in Northern Ireland must be improved on both sides of the community, because there's discrimination on both sides of the community.
That, yeah.
But it strikes me that a lot of your campaigning and a lot of your lobbying has actually been unhelpful, and it's the view of the Irish government, and it's the view of John Hume, and it's the view also of the four main church leaders in Northern Ireland who agreed a call for fair employment very recently.
And what did they say about the MacBride Principles?
A call which is endorsed by John Major and
by the Irish National Caucus. I endorsed it.
Well,
I endorsed that.
That's fine.
So I endorsed it.
You're not in disagreement with the British government or John Major, who are making as much strides as they can to
in this particular
practices in Northern Ireland.
What we believe here, those who work with me, we say, look, Jewish Americans, African Americans, quite rightly and quite nobly, get America to take a stand for their homelands. South Africa would not be on the verge of democracy if it weren't for African Americans in this country, and I salute them for that, and I joined them outside the South African embassy, and I went to prison. I was the first Catholic priest to go to jail for the South African cause here in Washington, and I salute them, and I salute what the Jewish Americans have done for their homeland, because without them Israel probably wouldn't exist. I am simply saying, and I base my work and position on this principle, Irish Americans have a perfect right, indeed a duty, to get America to take a stand for human rights in Northern Ireland.
And I assume that means that Irish Americans should join Ted Kennedy or Patrick Monaghan in condemning IRA violence and condemning the abuse of human rights by terrorists in the IRA, in INLA, and in the Protestant paramilitaries as well. And when you talk about human rights, you always mean the British government is abusing human rights. But you seem not to.
Don't tell me what I do know.
But you seem in your campaigning. But you seem in your campaigning always to concentrate on that and never to concentrate on the rights of civilians killed in Northern Ireland.
I do not deny it for a minute.
If the audience thinks that Jewish groups and Israel and Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, the United Kingdom, that they should all interfere in the affairs of our government? I think it would be very difficult to rule if this happened.
Look, all of these countries have signed international human rights agreement and Universal Declaration on Human Rights, which means one thing very simple. No country in the world can say from then on that the treatment of their own citizens is not the business of any other people. That's why we have a Universal Declaration of Human Rights. That's why I have a duty to take a stand for justice, not only in Ireland, but in South Africa, or in Chile, or in Honduras, or any place else in the world. And it's only an antediluvian, primitive type of philosophy that says, mind your own business. We can torture our people, and it's none of your rights. Butt out. That's nonsense.
Hello, my name is Yuri Kambara from Marin County, California, and I was wondering how each of you felt about John Major and how he compares to Margaret Thatcher.
Favourably, but that wouldn't be hard. Excuse me.
I think John Major is a very fine man, and he certainly is. Excuse me. He has a very large act to follow in Margaret Thatcher, because she had so much power. And remember that Margaret Thatcher was able to rule as she did, rule her government as she did.
Britannia.
Rude. Because you're a rude man.
I think John Major is a wimp.
He is, no, he's a very fine man.
That's why you like him, because you think he's going to be a pushover for the pro-Republican cause.
I think he is very fair, and I think if there was an election today, possibly he would win again.
Can I answer that
regardless
question?
Regardless of the...
Can I answer that question in terms of Ireland? I think both John Major and Albert Reynolds, the Irish Taoiseach, have the big problem of living in the shadow of their predecessors, who were, in a sense, much bigger politicians than they are. Lady Thatcher in Britain and Charlie Hockey in the Republic. One of the things that I suppose worries me about the present peace process is that I think they both see this as a chance of, in a sense, redeeming their rather weak premierships. And I think that Albert Reynolds, for example, was too keen too early to press the present peace process. I think he raised expectations too high. For example, in October he was talking about peace before Christmas, and as we know, we're a long way off peace yet.
Next question.
Hi, my name is Daniel Boxall from Burbank, California. And before we came here, we were talking about religion. And my question was, do you feel that if Northern Ireland secedes from the UK and becomes part of Ireland, that the Protestant will be persecuted by the Catholics?
Yes, I would agree wholeheartedly with you. This is what would happen. And remember that in the Republic of Ireland at one time was 90% Roman Catholic, and that was in 1921. Today it's 98% a Roman Catholic state. While the people in Ulster, in Northern Ireland and in the United Kingdom, they have many advantages that they do not have in a theocratic state. I think the Protestants of Northern Ireland would find it very difficult to join the Republic of Ireland.
I think it's one of their fears, obviously. But I think that there's a lot of misperception on each side about the other. You're dealing with, for example, a man like Dr. Ian Paisley, the firebrand, a preacher who's the head of the Democratic Unionist Party, who speaks in language which would be more appropriate for the 17th century, who talks about the Pope being, you know, the whore of Babylon. The idea of the Southern Irish persecuting Protestants because they're Protestant, I find absurd, but that is a genuine fear in Northern Ireland amongst a sizable body of Protestants, and they do look towards the south and see that there has been a falling off in the numbers of Protestants over the years in the Republic.
You see, the awful problem of the partition of Ireland is that it created two religious monoliths. In the south, it created a pan-Catholic state, 95% Catholic. In the north, it created a Protestant state for a Protestant people. Now, that British Act institutionalized religious divergence and difference. What I want to see in Ireland is religious pluralism. I think Maureen's antiquated anti-Catholic bigotry is deplorable.
How dare you?
Because nobody believes that Protestants would be persecuted. No enlightened person. Now, Paisley exploits people.
I am a supporter of integrated schools.
You just said that the Protestants would be persecuted in Southern Ireland.
They most certainly...
That's bigotry.
No, it's not.
And what would you call it? What would you call it then?
Let me say that in Northern Ireland, the Catholic population is 45% of the population. But when it comes to voting, those Catholic politicians only get about 28% of the vote.
Maureen.
The IRA gets 10% of the vote.
I'm not talking about the IRA.
So both the IRA and the nationalist politicians are both very minor parties
Maureen,
in Northern
my question
Ireland.
is, why do you
also,
think...
the churches in...
Why do you think the Protestants would be persecuted in Southern Ireland? Please answer that question. I'll answer your question.
The churches in... I'm answering a question here. The churches in Northern Ireland are extremely united.
Why would the Protestants be persecuted in Southern Ireland?
You will find that
Would someone in the audience ask her that question, please, and she'll answer it. Why does she think the Protestants would be oppressed in Southern Ireland?
Well,
ask that question, please.
First and foremost, they do not have schools. Oh, no.
Yeah, why do you think Protestants would be oppressed? I know Paisley does, but do you think that the Protestants would be oppressed in Southern Ireland, and why?
I think they would have a very difficult time. I think they would have a very difficult time in jobs. There wouldn't be any schools for them. How could the Republic of Ireland provide the excellent schools that Northern Ireland has? Northern Ireland has the best schools in the United Kingdom.
I think she's ducking my question, isn't she?
Results.
Do you get that impression?
I don't want to answer you.
We'll have
yes,
to
she
go
doesn't.
to our next student question. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Janie Orthy. I'm from Minneapolis, Minnesota. This question is directed to any one of you. I'm interested in knowing where the IRA and the UDA receive their funds.
They receive most of their funds from their own racketeering practices in Northern Ireland and in the Republic as well. I assume you asked that question because you were reading the Harper's Magazine article, which I think was in your information pack, or I was led to believe that. Is that why you asked the question? No. You said... no. I mean, the Harpers, I mentioned the Harpers because there's the implication in the article that everyone is doing this, or the paramilitaries on both sides are doing this because they're making lots of money. And the article confuses two things, money and motivation. In terms of money, a paramilitary organization needs money to survive. The IRA probably needs between about $12 million and $15 million to continue running each year. They have to pay very small amounts, mind you, to their 300-400 frontline gunmen, to the 600 or so people around them who are giving extra support. They have to finance Sinn Féin, the headquarters in Belfast, Londonderry, Dublin. They have to buy explosives and arms. They have to keep a general staff in Dublin. They have to finance active missions abroad in Europe and Britain. And altogether that costs you, I mean, nigh on $15 million. In the same way, the Protestant paramilitaries need money to survive as well, and most of that comes from racketeering, it comes from extortion, it comes from protection money that they demand, it comes from a fleet of taxi cabs that both sides own in Belfast, it comes from gaming machines, and it comes from pubs and clubs. And some of it comes from legitimate organisations. In one sense, it's a bit like the mafia, in that you know, you begin illegitimately, and then you can put your money into legitimate organisations as well.
Is any of that money received from outside of
Yes, I mean,
it's
been calculated, and it's very hard to calculate how much money has come from Irish Americans. There's one calculation I saw of about $3 to $5 million since 1971 has been provided by Irish Americans, which has gone into the Republican movement. NORAID is the main collector of money over here. NORAID always claims that none of its money goes towards the purchasing of weapons in Northern Ireland, and that the money only goes towards welfare of the families of imprisoned IRA men. It is very hard to prove either way whether that money has directly gone to fund gun running, the purchase of weapons. But what it does do is indirectly support the IRA, because it allows the IRA to shift some of the money that they might use for those families, the welfare money for the families of imprisoned IRA men, back to purchasing weapons. Senator Edward Kennedy, supported by Patrick Moynihan and Hugh Carey, back in 1977, issued a statement on St. Patrick's Day, urging Americans not to contribute to organisations which were linked in any way with paramilitary groups in Northern Ireland. And Senator Edward Kennedy said that it shouldn't be on any Irish American's conscience that their efforts or their dollars are leading to death in Northern Ireland. And I think that's worth...
I agree with that completely. Can I say something here? It shouldn't be on the head of any Irish American that he or she causes death in Northern Ireland. But equally, and legislatively in the first place, it shouldn't be on the hands of any English man and woman who paid tax dollars to keep up a sectarian, oppressive system in Northern Ireland, financing and training and equipping the British Army. Now, as regards, you had your say, as regards loyalist terrorism, who funds them? It mustn't be left out here that in many documented cases, we have absolute proof, like Amnesty just wrote a report on it, about political killings in Northern Ireland. Many times when the loyalists take action, they're facilitated and equipped very often with the help of British intelligence and British Army. Now, pick up the most recent report by Amnesty International, just out, political killings in Northern Ireland, where it cites the British government for collusion, for cooperating and helping and arming the Protestant terror gangs to kill Catholics.
First of all, Father, it doesn't actually say that, the report. No. What the report condemns is a collusion between sections and elements in the Ulster police force and sections within the UDA of helping Protestant paramilitary
and British
groups.
intelligence.
And British intelligence.
Yes,
but,
well,
no,
that's
but
what
you
I
said,
said.
No, you didn't. You said British intelligence and British government. We're talking about individuals in all those three organisations. No, that's an important distinction. Father,
the intelligence operates without the British government. Come on. Now, look, join me in this. Okay, I will admit that there's many problems from the Catholic side in Northern Ireland. I have denounced the IRA unequivocally. I want this gentleman to unequivocally denounce the murder and killing and the oppression and injustice conducted by Her Majesty's government in Northern Ireland. Will you do that?
I'll answer that question if you allow me to.
Will you condemn it? You asked me, will I condemn the IRA? Will you condemn the British government? Right here, right now.
Well, if you shut up for a second,
Go ahead.
you might hear my reply.
Do it.
And my reply is that in Insight Magazine, Washington Times recently, I wrote that one of the most disturbing elements in the last few years in Northern Ireland has been the growth of the Protestant paramilitary groups and the collusion by elements with those groups, by individuals within the UDR, the Ulster Defence Regiment, part of the British Army, an Irish regiment, and in the RUC. What I will not
and what about the government?
What I will not do...
The Stalker affair. I'm not talking about Protestants. It's easy to condemn Protestants. Do you condemn the British government for its human rights violations in Northern Ireland? Yes or no?
Yeah,
yes or no?
Yes, but...
I didn't hear it. Yes or no?
Hold on, if you let me finish. I will condemn the shadowy shoot-to-kill policy by sections within the Ulster Police Force and by sections within the British Army. Of course I will. I think it's profoundly unhelpful.
And
I think it's immoral.
The Guildford 4 sentences?
And do we also...
Father, you haven't read what I've written over the years.
No, we haven't.
Of course I do.
Well, that's good. I'm glad you do.
Of course I do. But
and Maureen,
hold on, Father, hold on. Please let me finish.
Okay, go ahead.
Because one thing that you do not allow these people to understand is the whole dynamic of what is happening in Northern Ireland. One of the tragedies, one of the awful patterns in this long tapestry of violence is that you have a terrorist organisation whose aim...
Many
terrorist organisations.
Including the British Army.
And let's just concentrate on the IRA for a second.
You're doing that all along. I want you to introduce a new element here.
We just have a couple of seconds left, so if I could ask you each for a final closing.
It is. The IRA cries crocodile tears. A terrorist organisation in a democratic society wishes to provoke illiberal, harsh reactions by a democratic government. Unfortunately, the British government over the last 25 years has often, and all too often, allowed that to happen. The Guildford 4 case, the Birmingham 6 case, were deeply damaging to Protestant interests in Northern Ireland, to British interests in Ireland as well. But the IRA must share its blame for the corrosion of the judicial system in Northern Ireland.
I'm sorry,
and for provoking
overreaction.
I would like to have
very
one
little
last
time.
Saying
one more.
That the IRA has its headquarters in the Republic of Ireland, and from the Republic of Ireland they commit murder across the border, and I haven't heard that mentioned tonight, and I thought you should know that.
The violence of the British government, of the IRA, the violence of every group who's using violence in Northern Ireland must cease. There cannot be peace for as long as the British government and the IRA and the Protestant loyalists, paramilitaries commit violence.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments here. We're totally out of time. Thank you for your questions and comments. Join us again next week at this time. Thank you.